At 17 minutes past 9, we pay tribute now to a man who moved a lot of people, who certainly has made it to the annals of history in so many ways as tributes continue to pour in. Following the announcement of his death, we're speaking here about American politician, world-renowned civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson. The 84-year-old passed away this morning in the U.S. city of Chicago. Among those who have sent their condolences is South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who says Jackson has contributed to the attainment of freedom in South Africa. Ramaphosa spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says Jackson was a champion for justice, equality and empowerment.
On behalf of all South Africans, President Ramaphosa extends his condolences to the Jackson family, the Rainbow Push Coalition, and the many organizations within the American civil rights movement and in causes elsewhere in the world who were inspired by the Reverend Jesse Jackson's principles and leadership. Reverend Jesse Jackson's irrepressible campaigns against apartheid and his support for the liberation struggle was a towering contribution to the global anti-apartheid cause.
Move on. And that was Vincent Magwenya speaking on behalf of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Other notable tributes have come from, U.S. civil rights movement colleagues and two-time Democratic presidential candidate Jesse Jackson. That is, he died at the age of 84, prompting of widespread commiserations. We had people like Kamala Harris, who is a former vice president in the United States, who also had a lot to add about the life and works of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who, of course, is a civil rights leader who carried forward the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., mobilized voter registration efforts, forged broad coalitions across race and class with his Rainbow Coalition movement. His commitment to justice, equality and empowerment made him a defining voice in American public life for more than 5 decades. So, right, let's find out now from one of those who was inspired by the life and works of Reverend Jesse Jackson, and that is in the United States, in Atlanta specifically. We speak to a former official of the city of Atlanta, Harvard Law graduate Wilton Lawrence, Larry Wallace, as he's known. He worked with Reverend Jackson intermittently over the decades. And condolences to you, his family and other colleagues. And thank you so much for speaking to us. I know it's a difficult time to actually gather your thoughts while you're still mourning.
No question, but I'm happy to do so in honor of one of the world's leaders. He's been a leader in a variety of areas, whether it comes to world affairs, rescuing hostages, fighting for civil rights, running for president of the United States, and many, many other activities where he has served and helped those of us who have been oppressed.
And I want to talk about his musings. You are obviously within the realm of law, constitutional law. And one of the things that he said was that civil rights was the unfinished business of democracy. And I want to hear from you from a comparative constitutional law perspective. How did this framing of what has happened in the United States, what is happening now in the United States resonate with particularly the post-colonial era, if we can describe it as that, given, as I said, what is happening now in the United States?
Well, the foundation exists in our Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, decree and do establish the government of the United States. It was not perfect then. It's not perfect now, but it's much better over the last 250 years.
And his campaigns really focused on, acting against corporate discrimination, financial exclusion. He anticipated today's global debates on racial capitalism. What are some of the legacies that the younger generation, who may not have been exposed fully to his passion, his sacrifice, the work that he's done, the legacy that he leaves behind in light of that?
The Reverend Dr. Jackson's organization, People United to Save Humanity, entered into these contracts or agreements with various multinational corporations, including Toyota, the vehicle manufacturer, McDonald's, and many, many others. And those agreements set goals and timetables to increase the diversity in jobs, in products, in all kinds of rights for various discriminated groups, including Jews, women, blacks, Asians, and others. And those agreements provided a basis after they were struck to have Operation Push enforce them. One of the things we have had as great difficulty in civil rights is that even when major steps were made with great platitudes, there was no mechanism in many of those promises to follow up and enforce. Throughout his brilliance with People United to Save America or to save humanity, they always had that enforcement mechanism. It allowed for increase in diversity on the board of directors, increases in senior management, increases in sponsorship of various activities that would promote those noble goals.
And I want to look at, as I mentioned, he is much recognized worldwide for his push against racism rather as a global system. He's done that in America. He's fought for it in Africa. I was actually just saying to my colleagues, the first time I met him was at Ghana's Jubilee celebration of independence, and that was seen as a huge Pan-African moment, and he attended that and he spoke very passionately about that. So I just want to look at where the United States is now and the work that he's done just in challenging the foundations of that institutional legal foundations that still exist post-World War II, and what those who are fighting for civil rights in the now can learn from his work.
Well, where we are today is that the foundation, the initial work, a lot of progress has been made. But as recently as the last 12 months, some of those institutions, some of those pieces of the foundation have begun to be challenged, and other forces seek to turn them back. What we need to head in the direction of now is to say to those forces, we will not go back. We must go forward. And when you have the type of population shifts that we're having worldwide, with many more of the groups that have been oppressed being larger, stronger, and more populated each year you go by. For example, in the United States, 2013 was the first year that more white people in the United States died than were born. And so some of those evil forces, and it's not all of them, but some of them, they're structurally reduced, will continue to be reduced based on population projections for at least the next 40 years. So the groups that have grown, have expanded, are continuing to expand, will do so over that period of time. So we are not going away. That progress is not going to be erased. And those who care today for the benefit of all people must fight to improve things and to follow that language from the Constitution to keep building a more perfect union.
Mr. Wallace, you worked with him over the decades. Can you just share your experiences of not only meeting him, but I'd like to hear about his personal theology, that of servant leadership. We forget that in his charisma as a politician, as a human being, that he was, of course, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Well, I'll give you 3 starting points. Martin Luther King was born 20 years before me. My mother was born 19 years before me. Jesse Jackson was born 7 years before me. And because of my family activism, I was exposed to King, to Jackson, and many others early in my teenage life, and have continued interaction with them. With regard to the Reverend Dr. Jackson himself, I first became involved with him when I was the person on my university campus to invite speakers. And so I invited him as a speaker, became personally responsibility for driving him from the airport, checking in and paying for his hotel room, and being sort of an escort during the week he was on campus. And so we had various interesting side conversations, and it helped me better understand where he was coming from and where he wanted to go. Even though subsequent to that week of interaction, I didn't have much direct contact with him until his 2 presidential campaigns in 84 and 85. He ran both times. My wife at the time was chair of his campaign for the state of Virginia. And so every campaign event that touched Virginia, every visit he made to Virginia, we were again responsible for escorting him. And we had multiple private conversations. And it really goes back to something that he echoed, as he did many times in the speech at Vanderbilt, where he said, "I am somebody." And he implored the crowd to repeat after him, "I am somebody." And that engendered a sense that we were not paupers at the table, but we deserved fairness, opportunity. We deserved a chance. We deserved that we had earned, and we deserved that society could provide us. And in many ways, society was very kind to some of those of us who came into the world roughly impoverished. And he was a real leader, which is why my quote for him is not civil rights leader, it's not political leader. He was, in many, many ways, a world leader.
And indeed,
in many areas.
Because he was involved in a lot of transnational solidarity work, and he could walk a tightrope between Republicans, for instance, and civil rights movement leaders and activists. But I want you to tell me about your experience of how he could say something that is much needed, that is hard, but at the same time be able to assuage a situation. When was the last time, or something that really stands out to you, where he was able to navigate that, walk that tightrope of two very competing priorities?
Well, the truth is that a leader like him achieves things because they can expand between the two virtues of strength and compassion. He had the compassion for the least of these, but he also brought out of himself and of others the strength to move ahead, the strength to improve. He will be dearly missed, but his contributions, I believe, will continue to serve us well. And there are a lot of other leaders out there who would do well for us and for themselves to adopt that combination of strength and compassion.
Mr. Wallace, I'm just going to give you an opportunity to share your condolences, not only with his family, his friends from far field, and his colleagues. I was speaking to James Gomez earlier on, and I know he worked very closely with him for a very, very long time, and that's how I was able to, connect with Reverend Jackson over the years, and he was saying he's absolutely gutted that he really feels like he's lost a father. So how would you like to extend words of comfort, not only to people like James, his family, and others who worked with Reverend Jackson for so many years, of whom he was a father figure, an uncle, a friend, a mentor?
There are so many individuals, so many groups that deserve to receive condolences because of Jesse's contributions to the rest of us. And I agree with you that longtime personal aides, another one, Yolanda Caraway, there are many, and a lot of the contributions, he even sacrificed is the word I would use, a big part of his family by, after getting involved in running for president, he then delivered two of his children to be United States congressmen. One remains in congressman now, and the other is seeking to come back and is running in primaries very soon. His wife, his supporters, his beneficiaries all deserve condolences because they truly have lost not just a leader, but a compatriot and a friend.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. And again, I wish you well. Extend my warm wishes of condolences to you as well. Wilton Lawrence, Larry Wallace, Harvard Law graduate, former official of the city of Atlanta, who worked with Reverend Jackson intermittently over the years. And as he says, they were just 7 years apart, and he interacted with him and the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. He comes from an activist family that was involved in the civil rights movement. He and his wife even were part of managing Reverend Jackson's campaign when he ran for president in the United States. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And of course, we'll continue to get more insights on the work that he did as a global statesman. He, as I've mentioned, has been seen as somebody who established a model for civil society actors working in international diplomacy. We'll next speak to Nelson Mandela Foundation's Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi. We continue looking at news of U.S. civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson, who passed away in the early hours of this morning at the age of 84. We were just speaking to one of his friends and colleagues in Atlanta just a short while ago. Now in conversation with the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Buthelezi. I know he has been to Houghton, to the foundation. He has long-standing ties with your patron, former President Nelson Mandela. Just in terms of the memory work that is there at the Mandela Foundation, can you just tell us how he is reflected, Reverend Jesse Jackson?
Thank you, Tsepiso, for having me this evening, and good evening to your viewers. Reverend Jackson, as you rightly say, had a long relationship with Madiba during Madiba's incarceration, but also, in fact, when Madiba was released in 1990, Reverend Jackson was there with him. And he continued to visit the foundation throughout Madiba's life. He was last at the foundation soon after Madiba's passing in 2013. And he took part in a dialogue at the foundation reflecting on Madiba's life after Madiba's passing in 2013. So his presence is reflected in our archives, it's reflected on our website, and we continue to remember him. We mourn his passing, this towering figure.
So just looking back at his teachings, as I mentioned, that, he is seen by many as, an icon, a model of international solidarity, civic work in banishing racial discrimination systemically across the globe.
Indeed he was. And I think what we take from him is really that principled solidarity that held that if anybody is not free in the world, we're all not free. What I think he contributed to the struggle against apartheid was to make the connection, especially in the United States, between the struggle in the United States for civil rights and the struggle in South Africa against apartheid, for freedom, for justice, for equality. Those struggles and the principled ways in which he stood with people of South Africa and with other oppressed people around the world is one of the major legacies that he leaves behind in the world. I also had the honor of once attending a protest in New York as a student there, which he addressed. And that was the message I remember most strongly from his address to that protest against police brutality. It was the principled stand. It was the principled solidarity with all oppressed peoples that we continue to celebrate him for.
And one of the things they had in common was that of law, power, and forgiveness, and charisma, I might say, of the two men. I know a lot of people speak about that, about former President Nelson Mandela. I personally never got to experience that. But two very exuberant figures. You say you had the pleasure of seeing him, hearing him address the crowds when you're attending that protest. But what are the stories that people share about Reverend Jackson, his visits to South Africa, how he interacted with Madiba?
Colleagues who worked with Madiba and who met Reverend Jackson when he was here, of course, talk about, among other things, including the charisma that you referred to. They were both towering figures in the sense that they were very tall men. And that charisma, came from people towering over you as you talk to them, as they talk to you. But, this is something that also Reverend Jackson made a principle. He said, do not look down on another person unless you're helping them up. So the towering figures standing tall above you were not looking down at you. They were actually people who were engaging you in important conversations. And that's something that people who interacted with both men found very inspiring. The other thing that I think they shared is the question of hope. Reverend Jackson talked a lot about keeping hope alive, and that was what one of the enduring lines that he would address to crowds at marches, at protests, and that is something that also I think was very important to Madiba. We learn from his writing that hope for him was not about wishing for things to be different. It was about working every day to make a difference. And I think that is one thing that was important to both Madiba and to Reverend Jackson, keeping hope alive, and hope being something that drives you to wake up every day and try to make a difference in the world.
Quick final word of comfort, condolence, encouragement to his family, friends, colleagues alike, and those who, still revere him as a towering historical figure of resistance against oppression, against discrimination, and as you say, of inculcating hope where, the circumstances seem bleak.
We join with the world in mourning the passing of Reverend Jackson. But I think what we take heart from is that the struggle that he prosecuted all his life is a struggle that continues. We take heart in the fact that there are new leaders, there are new people who are taking up the baton to continue the fight for a just world. And we hope to everybody who knew, who loved, who worked with Reverend Jackson, that they continue to take heart and that they continue to join hands with all of us in taking the struggle that Reverend Jackson, Martin Luther King, Madiba, and many others fought for, that the work of fighting for justice in the world is not complete. The work that they started, we need to take forward. We need to continue in our own way in the times that we live in now.
And that there is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi, just sharing his thoughts and that of the foundation, of the legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson. I don't know if you have...
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buthelezi. I don't know if you as my viewers, my listeners, have noticed that I've had a smile dance around my face because I am just thinking of various times and moments that I've spoken with Reverend Jackson, and he was full of mischief. As I mentioned, the first time I met him was at the celebration of Ghana's Jubilee celebration of independence in Accra, and I was actually just thinking of Peter Ndoro. He was there with me, colleagues Tsapo Ikaneng, Lahana Tsotetse, and he was very mischievous. But anyway, unfortunately, the last time I did speak to him was in 2022. He was already frail already, and it was just sad. But I'm trying to put together some of the interviews, but one we were able to get throughout the various interactions I've had with him as a journalist was an interview I did with him on SAFM. That was when he learned of the passing of Bra Hugh Masekela, and his people reached out to me. As I mentioned, I've been in touch with them, and they said, Reverend Jackson really wants to speak to the family, have them learn of his thoughts about how he feels about the passing of Bra Hugh Masekela. And I spoke to him and Salim Sal Masekela, the son of the musical icon Hugh Masekela, on his passing. This was in 2018, and here's a snippet of that conversation. Reverend Jesse Jackson wanted to pass on his condolences to the family, to the Masekela family, and I just thought, Sal, it's only fair if he speaks to you then rather than the Reverend passing them on to me. Reverend, a very good evening to you. So it's so lovely to have you back on the line here on SAFM. Again, a very good evening to you, and thank you for taking the time.
Indeed. I feel honored.
So, Rev, we've got Sal Masekela, Bra Hugh Masekela's son on the line. I know you wanted to pass on your condolences to the family.
God bless you, my son. Let me say that Hugh Masekela was a world-class musician, an anti-apartheid freedom fighter. When the lights were turned off in South Africa, we could not communicate to South Africa, could not see Mandela, could not see the group on Robben's Island. As Hugh traveled around the world, he put light and educated people inspire people about the horrors of apartheid, use his talents and his platform to be a source of inspiration. A very pro-Mandela freedom fighter. And our hearts rejoice in his life, his living, his legacy. And I miss him already as a friend, but that was none greater than Hugh Masekela. His contribution is legendary. And so give your family my warmest regards.
Sal is actually on the line. Sal, would you like to speak to the Reverend?
Yes, indeed. First of all, Reverend Jackson, thank you so much. It is an honor to receive that message from you and to hear you describe it in that way, that he was a light, and that was able to really make South Africa visible for people around the world is truly who he was. And, when he first came to America in the early 60s, one of the things that spoke to him the most was the civil rights struggle, to leave apartheid and to come to America and witness civil rights. And as you know, he did everything he could to be involved in that fight and in that struggle.
At a time when there was not much coverage about South Africa, although we knew something was happening that was wrong. We knew a little bit about Winnie Mandela, some people to ease up, but between Levy and Bula and Hugh, and the role that Harry Belafonte played, having to get them a platform here in this country. Hugh used his platform as a music. You came to hear him play music, but you heard the lessons of anti-apartheid and what it had then. He was a great force in world global mobilization in that system. It was not just those on the inside of the apartheid, but those around the world. He was a world-class musician, a global mobilizer in that wretched system, and I thank him so much. We're all in his debt in a very, very big way.
Thank you. I will pass that message on to my family. We're all gathered here right now, just celebrating his life.
Reverend, thank you so much. It's so lovely.
God bless. Give them my regards, okay?
Thank you. I will do that, Reverend Jackson. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Sal. Thank you, Reverend Jesse Jackson, U.S. Civil Rights Movement icon.
Tshepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
Wow, that's adulting for you. I just actually can't believe both are gone. I was thinking of Hugh Masekela. I spent hours with him in the parking lot here at the SABC just to laughing my head off. So we say we pay homage to those two individuals. And that was a conversation there with Reverend Jesse Jackson as well as Sal Masekela on the passing of Hugh.